Hi, folks. Welcome to SMA, behind the scenes of the 31 Days of SMA campaign. My name is Ali Macgregor, and I will be your host this evening. So if you're just tuning in, I'm going to be joined by a few special guests who've been involved in SMA News Today's 31 Days of SMA campaign, which has been running all month long. Hopefully you've had a chance to check it out. And our conversation this evening will be focused on giving you a sneak peek behind the scenes of everything that it takes to put this wonderful campaign together. So I'm looking forward to being joined by Kevin Schaefer, Katie Napiwocki, and later on we'll have Samantha Przybylski join us as well, closer to 7:30. So I'm really excited to get started. Again, this is about the 31 Days of SMA campaign, and I'm going to invite Katie and Kevin to join me now. And Kevin, I'm inviting you as well. Hey, Katie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for helping me there. I wasn't sure what was going wrong on my end, so I'm so glad you got through. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Allie. Hey, Katie.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Good. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to be here.
Same here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad that you guys are here, and we'll have Sam join us a little later on. We have 5 people joining us already, so this is fantastic. And I already mentioned this is a behind the scenes of the 31 Days of SMA campaign, which you both have been very involved with since the beginning. But just in case folks don't know you, Katie, do you mind just giving yourself a brief introduction and telling folks how you got connected with SMA News Today?
Sure. I actually reached out to SMA News Today probably 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago already, because I was interested in writing and got connected with Kevin and all of the other awesome writers on the team and kind of just started my writing journey with all of them. So I'm a columnist and also a column lead for Bio News. And for the past 2 months, I've been Kevin's co-pilot on this awesome project that we're talking about.
Awesome. And Katie, was writing for SMA News Today your first foray into writing, or were you writing before that?
It was definitely my introduction into writing. So it's been a pretty cool journey. I've learned a lot from a lot of really talented people.
That's great. Thank you. And Kevin, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with you because you're all over the place at SMA News Today, but maybe just give folks a little introduction as well into yourself.
Sure. So my journey with SMA News Today and its parent company, Bio News, began a little over 4 years ago. I was just fresh out of college, and I was an English major. I knew I wanted to write, but was just kind of looking for any kind of freelance opportunities. I stumbled upon SMA News Today, just Googling one day, and at that time, Brianna Albers was the only columnist there. It was still pretty early in its stages, and so I reached out to her on Twitter. So I owe a lot of where I am to her. She connected me with the editors at the time, and that's how I got started. I write a column called Embracing My Inner Alien, which is probably like way more goofy and less eloquent than a lot of Katie stuff. But I still write that. And then again, that started my journey with Bio News. But now I work full time for the company. My primary role is I manage our forums division. And then I do multimedia projects like this, and also the podcast, my column. So a lot of different things. And yeah, I work with a lot of really great people. And this is one of my favorite projects to do every year. So, and I was excited to have Katie, as she said, co-pilot with me this year.
Awesome. Fantastic. Katie, before we go any further, what is the name of your column for SMA News Today?
My column is titled A Wildflower in the Wilderness.
Awesome. Very similar to your Instagram handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not already following Katie and Kevin, you can follow them from this Instagram Live, which is great. So I like to start interviews off with a couple of rapid fire fun questions. And you know what? I think that Sam is already here. So let me just see if Sam can join us before we even get started. Sam, I'm sending you a request. So we'll just wait for her to join. There you are. Hello.
Hi,
Hi, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
hi. Hi, how are you guys?
Doing really well.
Good.
Good. It's so great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Fantastic. Before we do the rapid fire, fun kind of questions, do you want to just tell folks who you are and how you're connected to SMA News today?
Sure. My name is Samantha. I am in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I do a lot of work on Instagram. I kind of share my life there and my everyday through stories and posts. I started following SMA News Today a few years ago already. I wrote a column last year for them for 31 Days of SMA and again this year. Just so thankful to be able to do that for them. And I'm actually really good friends with Katie, so full disclosure there. She's one of my good friends. I adore her. I love to read her column at SMA News Today and follow along. So yeah, just thankful to be here.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to jump into talking about the 31 Days of SMA campaign in just a second. But my first question for the three of you is, if COVID did not exist and you could travel anywhere in the world right now, money is not an option, time is not an option, COVID is not an issue, where would you like to travel? And I'll start with you, Kevin.
I would probably, so 2 years ago, I went to California for the last SMA conference, did Disneyland there. And since I have a lot of friends out there, I would definitely like to go back. Planning on it next year. The conference will be back there. But yeah, that would be mine. Back in California, Disneyland, all of that.
Awesome. Katie, what about you?
I would definitely go to Hawaii. That's always been on my list of places that I wanted to go.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Hawaii as well. And what about you, Sam?
Well, Katie stole my answer, so I'll pick a new one. I would like to go to Colorado. Actually, both my brothers live out there, and I haven't been yet, and so that's on my list.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so all in the United States. That's very good. I think I'm the only person on this chat who is in Canada right now. And if I could go anywhere in the world, I think I'd go to Australia or New Zealand, really far away, just to see what it's like over there. And then my next rapid fire question is, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream? And Katie, we'll start with you this time.
I don't think I've met a flavor that I didn't like. I don't discriminate. I'd probably pick butter pecan though.
Awesome. What about you, Sam?
I love Blue Moon. And I don't know if even everyone knows about Blue Moon, but it's hard to find when you leave Wisconsin.
I've heard about it, but we don't have it in Canada.
No, I'm so sorry you don't. You have to try it at some point in your life.
I'll put it on my bucket list.
Okay.
And Kevin, what about you?
I have to be boring and say vanilla with sprinkles, but I love cookies and cream too. So those are my top ones.
That is not boring. Those are great flavors. Yes. And you can add things to vanilla, which is always a bonus for sure. All right. So all three of you, it sounds like, have been part of the 31 Days of SMA campaign for the last 2 years. So basically the entire time that it's been running. Kevin, could you tell me where the idea for 31 Days of SMA came from and kind of what the goal was when you started off with it?
Sure. So this campaign started in 2019, and it actually originated on our cystic fibrosis site. So again, I mentioned that SMA News Today is part of a parent company called BioNews, and it's a network of rare disease websites. So SMA is one of many diseases we cover. So on the CF site, our community manager at the time, Luisa Palazola, came up with this idea of just like, hey, it's a CF Awareness Month. Why don't we just highlight different stories every day throughout the month? It was a brilliant idea, and we quickly replicated that on other sites. And so we started that with SMA in August of that year. And yeah, it's been a really cool evolution since then. So that was what the basic concept was just like have people primarily outside BioNews because, yeah, it's like Katie and I and other columnists, we already share our stories. We wanted to really hear from people outside our, circle and get different perspectives. And so, when I started doing 31 Days of SMA, I was mainly asking, friends who I knew through SMA conferences and people on social media to contribute. And we got a lot of great stories that year. and it's just really evolved since then. But that's always been the core concept, is just every day of the month for Awareness Month for respective diseases. In this case, SMA Awareness Month is in August. We just want to highlight different stories from people in the community.
Wonderful. And Katie, can you tell me a little bit about the process for finding contributors? Because that's 31 contributors at least every single day. It's quite a lot of people that you have to source. So what's that like?
So for me, it was really about widening the circle. So there were a lot of people that I knew who I wanted to tap into, friends or people who I was well acquainted with already. But then because we wanted to infuse a lot of diversity into this campaign, and we're really conscious of trying to give everybody a voice who wanted to be a part of it, certainly we reached out to people on social media who looked like they were interested in sharing their story and might want to be a part of it with us.
That's great. That's awesome. And was Sam one of those people? Was that one of the few folks that you reached out to through your network?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Sam, when you heard about the campaign, what was your initial response when you were asked to participate?
I was, of course, going to participate. I love sharing my story. I think it's helpful for our community overall to be able to read one another's ideas, thoughts, all of that. And so I was excited to help.
Yeah. And Sam, I know that you're a blogger and you share a lot of your story through Instagram as well. What is that experience like for you? And, kind of opening up your life to the world and to others in the SMA community, but also to people who may not know anything about SMA. What's that been like for you?
Luckily, it's been very rewarding and very non-confrontational. I know I don't have the biggest platform, but I do have some. And I'm just so thankful that everyone has been so kind and welcoming and inclusive. I don't get a lot of pushback or any horrible comments or things of that nature, which I'm so thankful for because I know they're out there. So yeah, I really like doing it. I like sharing. And if it benefits even one person, that was my goal. So
great. Katie, you mentioned that when you first started working for SMA News Today as a columnist, that was kind of your first foray into writing and sharing your story. So what did that feel like in the beginning for you? And were there any hurdles that you had to overcome to get comfortable sharing your story and writing about your life?
I think there were a lot of emotional hurdles for me because I don't always want to talk about my SMA. I want to break free a lot of times. And so it's tough to strike that balance of really digging deep within yourself and knowing that you are sharing some part of your life. But you're doing it with the intent that others will be uplifted from your story or, find something that they connect with and get through a part of their life that's difficult too. So I think it's really for me about balance.
Yeah, for sure. And Kevin, what about you? You're an English major, so you're no stranger to writing essays, first-person pieces. What was that like for you to start writing your column for SMA News Today?
Sure. So I did have the background in writing, but it was a different kind because, I was an English major with a film studies concentration. And then I worked for my school newspaper throughout college, but there I was primarily writing arts and entertainment pieces. So a lot of movie reviews, a lot of interviews with various local filmmakers and stuff. I one time got to interview the comedian and actor David Koechner from Office and Anchorman. So that was really, really cool. But I was used to that. But the only times I'd really written about my disability were I'd written a couple columns while I was there. And usually they were related to disability representation in media, things like that. But I had never done something that was completely vulnerable like this. And so it was very much a learning experience, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But I think what prepared me a lot was in my final semester, and I actually wrote a column about this, I think a year or two ago. I took a class called Creative Nonfiction, where the idea was you would pick a topic that and do a creative piece that was, still non-fictional, but written more in the sense of like a memoir or something like that, where it was, infusing a lot of the skills that I learned in fiction writing classes, but doing it from a non-fiction perspective. And if I was smart, I probably would have written a disability piece there, because I was the only wheelchair user in my class, and that would have been natural. But instead, I did a essay about comic book writing, and so even in that, I still hadn't written about my disability extensively, but I had a lot of the seeds planted. And and of course, if you read my columns, there's still a myriad of sci-fi and fantasy and movie and pop culture references. So I still do that all the time. But it was definitely a learning experience, kind of getting into this idea of really letting people into my life and talking about SMA in depth. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it ever since. And I think the column itself has evolved. And but it's not something I planned on doing. I think in college I planned on being like an arts and entertainment journalist, and then comic book writer, screenwriter maybe. And so I didn't really plan on doing something in the realm of rare disease advocacy and writing about SMA. So it was definitely a learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of that, when you approach folks to participate in the 31 Days of SMA campaign, what does that process look like, from extending the invitation to then publishing their story? Like, are you all involved in editing the story? Do you provide any sorts of parameters? Are there other people who support this work? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so this is another thing that's really evolved in terms of how we organize these projects. In 2019, when we started, it was literally just me reaching out to people, getting the stories in, and then we post them on social media. And really the only editing we did was making sure we'd have to edit them if they went over the Instagram word count, because that's the only frustrating thing about Instagram is it has a word and character limit. So we would have to edit some there. But aside from that, we didn't really have a formal editing structure. Now we have a very formal system where we collaborate not just with our social media team, but with our news editors as well. So basically how the process works in this case is me and Katie reach out to people. As she said, a lot of that is through personal connections, social media. We've also, posted messages on the SMA News Today account asking for contributors, so people can reach out that way. So we do all the outreach. We have a formal message kind of asking for, hey, so if you're willing to contribute, we would need a 300 to 400 word story, a picture of yourself, and then just permission to share your story on our website and our social media platforms. And so we give that to people, get stories in. We have a Google Drive to organize everything. And then, then the news editors do a lot of the formal editing, and very grateful for them because they really can make the stories as nice as they can be. And we make sure we have good pictures and all of that. So while Katie and I are kind of the faces of this right now, it's a lot of people involved in these campaigns, and we couldn't do that without our whole team at SMA News Today.
Yeah. And I have a question for Katie and Sam. I'm a writer as well, and sometimes the biggest hurdle to writing anything, whether it's your own story or something about someone or something else, is just getting started. So do you have any go-to writing prompts that you think of, or anything that you would tell someone who's new to sharing their story? Like, here are 10, topics to start with, or here's a way to overcome writer's block. Do you have any tips like that?
So I like to just a running list of ideas on my phone, actually. I find that inspiration strikes at the weirdest times. Like, I'll be at the store or with friends. And so I go back to those things that I write down, and sometimes I don't even remember writing them. But it's fun to kind of different ideas together. So I guess that would be my top advice for someone, is just pay attention to the thoughts that drift through your mind throughout the day, because you might want them back when you actually sit down to, if you did write something down, it can be really frustrating. So just find somewhere really workable for you, like a phone or, something a binder, whatever you connect with, and just keep your idea going.
That's a great piece of advice because we don't always remember those ideas that we have in the moment, or we wake up from a dream and we need to write it down, otherwise we'll forget it. Sam, would you add anything to that?
I share it with all of that. So I have my notepad in my phone. That's where I keep all my little notes. And just finding like magic in the mundane. Like people want to know about your everyday life. They want to know how you did this or that, or they don't care. Like you think your life is so boring, but other people don't feel that way. So just being able to convey those everyday things in kind of a more artistic way, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And earlier you mentioned that you hope that by sharing your story, you benefit at least one person. So have you heard from anyone who's read either your contribution to 31 Days of SMA or your blog or something you posted on Instagram? Is there something that stands out in terms of a person's response to something that you've published?
I mean, it would be hard to pick like one response to something. But like the community that I've made on Instagram and getting to hear from those people every day who I've never met in real life. They're just my Instagram friends, but I talk to them all the time. And being able to relate to one another and just connect on that platform, I guess, is my favorite thing about social media. And I look forward to hearing from all of them. And I love the support that we have for one another there and that we can help each other.
Yeah, for sure. And Kevin, I know you're also very involved in another community, another online community for SMA News Today, and that's the forums. Do you want to talk a little bit maybe about the forums and if people aren't familiar with them, what they can find there?
Yeah, sure. So the forums, like I said, that's my primary role at BioNews is I manage our forums division, and that includes we have 13 forums for our different sites currently, and we'll be building more along the way. But yeah, this idea originated actually with our CEO. He pitched it to me when I had just started working full time for BioNews back in late 2017. I guess I had gotten the job because I pitched the SMA podcast to my bosses then, and they really liked that, and that's when we started really collaborating on more multimedia ideas and social initiatives. And so the forum is, yeah, I mean, it's like a Facebook group, but only it is public, so it makes it more easy for people to find. But yeah, it's just a really cool community. We launched it in January 2018, and I had no idea what I was doing when I started, and we were struggling to get any kind of participation, and it was a very slow going process. But since then, it's really evolved. We have a ton of people posting daily and asking questions, and just like what Sam was saying about the Instagram community, it's like that where yes, it's online. You're not really interacting face to face with people, but I feel like I've gotten to really know people and connect with them through the forum. And so, yeah, these days I do more, like I said, because I manage all the other ones too. I do more an overseeing type role. Our main moderators are Deanne Runge and Alyssa Silva. And they also do other things for SMA News Today. Alyssa's a columnist and Deanne is a blogger. And so, yeah, it's a really great community. I mean, we'll have anything from topics about, healthcare obstacles or treatments to just random, really fun topics like would you rather stuff or what you're watching on Netflix, So the idea there is just to be a very inclusive community, and we also have gotten 31 Days contributors through that as well, because we get people who participate there that may not be as active on social media. And so we've been able to connect with a lot of people there and have them share their stories. So it's a really cool community. If you haven't joined, it's really easy to find. It's just, if you go on our main website, there's a forums tab on the top. It's really easy to register. But yeah, we would love to have you. And like I said, a lot of SMA News Today contributors are there all the time.
That's great. Katie, so I wanted to ask you, what was one of your favorite or most memorable stories from this year's campaign? And for people who don't know, they're being posted on Instagram. That's correct, right, Kevin? And
Yeah,
then they're also,
Instagram and the main site and Facebook.
yeah,
So
yeah.
all
So
over.
they're easy to find. But yeah, which one or two or three? There's probably so many that you really love. But can you just highlight a couple stories that really stand out to you?
They are all amazing. It's really difficult to pick one or two or three. But so day 12, Tristan Peters from Australia was a story that really resonated with me because I felt the exact same way as he described when he was a kid of just kind of wanting to hide my disability. I hadn't really identified with it yet. I wanted to appear less disabled versus more disabled. And so it wasn't really until I was well on my way into adulthood that I embraced my SMA. So I just really, I loved what he had to say. I thought it was really, really important for a lot of, especially younger people with SMA to hear. Because when I was younger with SMA, I wish that I would have had more people to look up to who had it. And day 24, Michael Garcia was also a really beautiful story. He gave us a glimpse of how it feels as a parent to have treatment options now for your child. And there was one really haunting line in his story, which actually became the title of the feature. And he just wrote, "My daughter is beauty in motion." And I thought it was really just memorable and so awesome to see is the evolution of their journey as a family.
Yeah, I love that line. That's really memorable. Sam, you contributed this year. What did you write about for your story?
I actually wrote my piece on my daughter's perspective of my SMA, which was really interesting for me to do because while I live and take care of her every day, I've never really like sat and thought of it from her point of view. So it was actually nice to be able to get to like write that on paper, and it turned out really beautiful. Like I loved how it ended up.
How did you go about doing that? Did you sit down with her and ask her questions and she kind of helped inform the piece?
Definitely. So like I did a lot of it from like my observations of her and just her responses to things. But also she's only 4, so my questions were limited to her. But I did do my best to like get her input on like how she would react to that. Like, what's your favorite part of my wheelchair? What do what are some things you wish I could do with you that I can't, or things of that nature. So just trying to keep it at her level, but then taking my creative perspective and observations and adding that in, so it was a cohesive piece in the end.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as 31 Days of SMA continues over the years and your daughter gets older, maybe someday she'll be contributing her own piece.
I know, I would love that. That's such an awesome thought for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, what about for you? What are some pieces that stand out for you that you hope people will take some time to read and check out?
Yeah, I mean, like Katie said, I would love to just to say everyone's. They're all great this year, but one I really liked is my friend Lamondre, who I've connected with because a longtime friend of ours, Helen Baldwin, who's another columnist for SMA News Today, she used to work at the school that Lamondre went to in elementary school, and so that's how part of how we connected. But he wrote a piece about kind of embracing all aspects of one's identity, including disability. And he wrote in there like he's gotten comments before saying like, oh wow, I almost forget you're disabled, like things like that, where he says that, when people say things like that, their intentions might be good. Like they're trying to say like, oh, you're really tough and you overcome all these things. But the reality is that statements like that are really rooted in ableism, which is the idea that people with disabilities are inferior to people without. And so he was saying that, no, I want to be recognized as disabled. That is like, it doesn't define me completely, but it is a big part of my identity. He talks about both that, his racial identity, all of these components to make him who he is. So that one was really powerful. I thought he dropped the mic on that. And then another one I really liked because it was very timely for this year Ina, who I think did day 3, I want to say, she wrote about the pandemic, and she lives in Malaysia, and she talked about how it's impacted her, and especially like the silver lining to come out of it is that it's forced her to rest more and really take care of her body and her needs. And that got me thinking a lot too, because myself included, I know a lot of people in the SMA community who can push ourselves way too hard often because like we want to, do multiple things, but, whether it's work related, social, whatever, we often have a tendency to, not everyone, but I know myself and many others have a tendency to really push ourselves. So I think the pandemic has really given us an opportunity to focus on the importance of rest and, maintaining our health. And I thought that was a really important and timely message. So I really like that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point too about your friend Lamondre's column about how, yeah, you're right. Disability doesn't necessarily define you entirely, but to ignore it or to downplay it is, not the correct way to approach it.
Yeah.
Which really leads me to my next question, which is, what do all of you think of the role of narrative storytelling as part of advocacy? Do you think it's one of the more important or effective ways to advocate for the SMA community? What do you think about that? Kevin, you can start if you'd like.
Sure. I think you can, read all of the medical facts about SMA and look up, statistics and stuff like that. All of that's really important. I don't want to downplay that. But I think without the narrative aspect and the human aspect, you're losing an essential part of really what SMA is and what the community is about. So I think it's extremely important for everyone. And that's why, sites like ours are geared toward everyone from people living with SMA to medical professionals to caregivers or, people who might know someone with SMA or another disability. So I think it's absolutely essential. And that's why I write my column. That's why I think this campaign is very much about that. And I mean, if you look at the stories, that all of them have very much a human component to them. Some might, still include medical terminology and that kind of thing, but the focus is more about, okay, this is what life with SMA is like. This is how it impacts me. And that I think is essential for understanding.
Absolutely. Katie, earlier you also talked about having more diversity in terms of the stories that are represented in this year's campaign. And you talked about a couple of different perspectives, like a patient's perspective, a parent of a patient's perspective, or a person with SMA's perspective. What other examples of diverse voices were you able to source for this year's campaign?
I think, to me, the most impressive part of our campaign was the global diversity that we had and just the different locations that we were able to pull different perspectives from. So it was really cool to see people cope when they're in different geographical locations. I think that also helps to open people's eyes to the vastness of this and how many people there really are to keep it out.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important distinction too, because I'm even thinking about the differences between Canada and the United States, and there are different cultural differences. Our healthcare systems are different. And then you mentioned that there was a contributor from Malaysia, there's a contributor from Australia, and those are on the other side of the world. So getting a peek at what life is like for people in those countries is really, really interesting.
Right.
So we are probably 12 months away from next year's campaign, but it's never too late, or too early, I should say, to start thinking about it. If people are interested in participating in next year's 31 Days of SMA, what can they do now, or what can they be prepared to do in the coming months to get involved?
I was going to say, if you reach out to us, I would love to get stories in early. So that's always but yeah, no, you can reach out to SMA News Today. You can reach out to me and Katie. And also, we have the 31 days, and that's every year. But we also do a lot of projects throughout the year to always amplify voices within the SMA community. Two of the biggest projects on that note are the podcast, which I mentioned. So I do that twice a month, and each month I do an interview with someone in the SMA community. I'm always looking for guests on there because, like I know a lot of people in the community, but I'm kind of running out of people of like direct connections I can ask for, and like, and then there are, plenty of people I know who are like, yeah, I don't really want to do a podcast. I'm a little nervous about that. And so if you are wanting to come on the podcast, I would love to have you. Again, that is for anyone in the SMA community. The other thing we do is an initiative called Monday Shoutouts, which we've paused during August because of 31 Days of SMA, but we'll resume that in September. And that is a weekly thing where our social media team just highlights different people in the SMA community. And I don't want people to think like you have to be like a Shane Burkhall or someone with like millions of followers to be featured on there. That also is just for, highlighting different people in the community with something to say, and that have, maybe they have an organization or a blog or something of their own, but they could just be, people who are active in the community. And so we love to feature people there. And again, the podcast, I'm always looking for guests. So those are both great. But yeah, if you would, we'll be looking for contributors early for next year. So if you're interested, we're always looking for new voices. So feel free to reach out to us.
Spoken like a true project manager, Kevin. You want to be on scope, on time, ahead of deadline.
I don't know. After doing it, like winging it the first year and doing it like kind of day by day, I'm like, yeah, I need to get more organized.
So that's one lesson that you've learned. You want to be more organized. You want to have things ready a little bit earlier. Katie, what about you? What lessons have you learned from being part of organizing the campaign?
Organization. Using your resources. Even if you reach out to someone who might, you never know who they might be connected to. So I think I've learned to ask questions.
Sorry, Katie, you cut out a little bit of the last sentence. Could you just repeat that? Sorry about that.
Just to be sure to ask questions and as well as I can.
Yeah, that's great. And Sam, what about you? I know that you're a contributor to the campaign. You're not one of the project managers, but have you learned any lessons along the way, just in general, of sharing your story online?
I guess I choose to advocate, to create connection. Connection makes people have awareness and compassion towards others who are different from them. And I think we need more of that in the world, and we need to be able to rely on one another. And so, yeah, I feel like just this is such a good way of spreading that message and cheering each other on and just getting to read what other people are facing in similar circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So I suspect that if people are following this Instagram account, they have a personal connection to SMA, whether they are a person with SMA or they know someone who has SMA, or they're in the medical community in some way. But I think part of the goal of this campaign is to reach people who might not be part of the SMA community. So what do you think needs to happen for that to be possible? And what do you think people who aren't connected to SMA personally can do to help support that effort? Kevin, do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm thinking about how, like we've had so many different voices contribute to this. And I think back to last year, I actually got my brother to write a story, and I was kind of amazed he agreed to it because he's not a writer at all. And like, he did a great job. And I'm thinking about, he did that story and then all of his friends were, maybe came across it. And so I think things like that, like, having those connections and that it's like a domino effect, and their story reaches people who may not have heard of SMA or don't really know enough about it. They're kind of indirectly affected. But yeah, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think like our site and campaigns like this are designed not just for the SMA community, but for anyone, because ultimately the goal is to be inclusive and to advocate for awareness and for people with SMA to be accepted into society just like everyone else. And so to do that, we absolutely need, people who don't necessarily have a connection to SMA or disability communities to be reading our stories and sharing them with, people they know. I think all of that really helps. And that's why I think, the stories we create, they're meant to be very universal. I have my friends who are outside the SMA community read them, and they always really like them and respond well. That's why I get really excited when I have like a friend or someone totally outside the SMA community like one of the stories. Like for instance, I saw the one, I think it was day 4 that Chaz wrote about disability representation in fiction. That like really did well, and I think reached a lot of people outside the SMA community. And I think that's so important because, again, if we want to really advocate and make the world more inclusive, that these stories need to go beyond our community and spread everywhere.
Absolutely. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just sharing and hopefully, like Kevin said, that domino effect takes over and we can get it as far as we can out there. So definitely love, share. And like you said, these stories can be for anyone. You can find something in them that relates to you as a human being. And hopefully our stories are looked more at like just another human being story. I hope that for my daughter, for her generation, like I hope this is normal. I hope it's inclusive and I hope it's loving. So yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how different the experience is for parents of children with SMA now versus the experience of perhaps your parents when, there wasn't social media, there was no SMA News Today, there was no 31 Days of SMA to really get those personal stories from other people and really connect and understand that this is part of a lot of people's experience. I just think that's very powerful, that human element and being able to reach across the internet and talk to someone on the other side of the world who understands what you're going through. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I was about to say, I can speak to that, and I'm sure Katie and Sam as well, because, when I was diagnosed in 95, that was still a little bit pre-internet age, and it took my mom's colleagues at the newspaper she worked for at the time to discover Families of SMA, which is now Cure SMA, and that was our first introduction to the community, but it was very small at the time, and there were very few adults there present at conferences, and so things have changed drastically since then. At conferences, you see now close to 200 adults, if not more, and there are many more all over social media. So I think absolutely things like the internet, social media have changed the game in terms of allowing the community to connect with each other. It's huge.
And Katie, you also alluded to the fact that one of the stories you really liked was about someone talking about their childhood with SMA, and you really resonated with that. And I just wonder if there's a young person out there reading your story and, having a similar experience and what that's like for them. Have you talked to any younger people who are reading your column or who are reading 31 Days of SMA and getting a sense that it's making a difference for them in a way that it could have made a difference for you at that age?
I think it's more so that I connect with the parents at this point, which is also really important too. They're old, people know what resources to put them to and who to grow. So I think it really does start with parents, especially now that we have so many different outlets for people with access to network.
Yeah, great. So just as we're wrapping up, I just want to make sure that people know how to find all of you after this interview. So Katie, remind everyone what your column for SMA News is called and where people can connect with you on social media.
Sure. So my column is called A Wildflower in the Wilderness, and you can find that on newstoday.com. Instagram, I'm at Wildflowers.
Great, thank you. And Sam, what about you? Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at SMA Sammy, Sammy Sue, Sue.
Fantastic. And Kevin, you are in all the places doing all the things. Where can people find you?
Yeah, like SMA News Today, you can find me. My column is Embracing My Inner Alien, the forums, and then the podcast. And the podcast is on our main site, but all over feeds wherever you listen to, whether on Spotify, Podbean, SoundCloud, wherever you like to listen. And then on Instagram, I'm at Kevin Schaefer 19. I'm also on Twitter, but I mostly rant about comic books and stuff on there. So that's, no. But I do talk about disability as well. But
Awesome. And if people want to get connected to you to either be on your podcast or to participate in 31 Days of SMA next year, they can just DM you or Katie or SMA News Today.
You can. I mean, I think my contact info is pretty easy to find as well on the main site. You can also, if you join our forums community, and post there that you're interested. But yeah, definitely, and you can DM the SMA News Today account as well. So any of those options. But yes, if you want to come on the podcast, I would love to have you.
Fantastic. So just as we're wrapping up, I'd like to wrap up with a fun question that's more selfishly motivated than anything else. I want to know what all of you are binging on Netflix, because in the last 18 months, I think I've seen everything. So hopefully you can suggest something new. Katie, what have you recently watched on Netflix that you've enjoyed?
I am not watching on Netflix right now. However, I am watching Ted Lasso. Loving that very much.
I've heard that's a really feel-good show, and everyone needs to check it out.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, I will do that. Sam, what about you? What are you watching? It doesn't have to be on Netflix. It can be on any platform.
I'm not the person to ask on what to watch, like that people like. Like, I just love reality TV and really junky shows. And my current one that I love is Love After Lockup, which is on WeTV.
All right. Okay, we will have a side conversation because I'm also a reality TV junkie.
Okay.
So we can connect with that afterwards. And Kevin, what about you? I know you love comic books. I know you love superheroes and Star Wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what's your recommendation?
Well, on Netflix, I'm almost done with Schitt's Creek, and my coworker Alyssa is rolling her eyes that I'm still not finished. But I like to take my time because that's such a good show that I like to savor it. But yeah, and then comic book media. My favorites are Superman and Lois, which is on the CW. The season 1 just wrapped up, and it's like the Superman adaptation I've been waiting years for, and it's phenomenal. And then on Disney Plus, Marvel's What If, which is also fantastic. It's the basically alternate universe tales within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So like the first episode is what if Peggy Carter became the version of Captain America instead of Steve Rogers. Obviously she's British, so she becomes Captain Carter. But it's like all these like alternate tales. It's an animated series, and the animation is spectacular. So yeah, but I have all the streaming services, so I alternate a lot between Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, all of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you like Schitt's Creek, I would recommend another Canadian show. It's called Kim's Convenience. It's shot in Toronto, which is where
I've heard
live.
Really good thing. I think that might be next. Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a great show.
Yeah.
And I'm going to definitely check out Ted Lasso because too many people have recommended it to me by now. It's time for me to actually watch it. So I just wanted to thank all three of you for joining me tonight to talk about behind the scenes of 31 Days of SMA. If folks haven't had a chance to check it out, or if you've fallen behind, it's available at smanewstoday.com. The stories are also posted on Instagram and Facebook, so be sure to check them out. And you can connect with all three of my awesome guests on social media. And just thank you again so much for being here, guys. It was really great to chat with all of you.
Allie, thanks for hosting. And Sam, Katie, thanks so much for joining. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.